My 7-year-old adopted granddaughter was left at home alone, while my son and his wife took their biological son on a 15-day Caribbean cruise. She called me at 2:30 in the morning, screaming and crying, asking Grandpa why didn't they wake me up. I booked last-minute tickets, and within 6 hours we crashed their vacation. I am Ezra Caldwell, 75 years old, and for the first time in my life, I am not the calm protector everyone thinks I am. I am a man on a warpath. Welcome back to Honor Revenge Stories. Or if this is your very first time here, I am so glad you found us. Before we get into today's story, if these kinds of tales speak to something deep in you, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It truly means the world to me. And I would love to know, is this your first story with us, or have you been here a while? Drop it in the comments below. Now, a quick note before we begin: some details in this story have been shaped and dramatized for the purpose of audio storytelling. Any resemblance to specific real people or events is purely coincidental. It is the truth at the heart of it that matters. The thunder that night rattled the bones of my old farmhouse. But it was the landline shrieking in the dark that jolted me awake. I keep that old phone for emergencies. It hadn't made a sound at that hour in years. Not since Loretta died. The bedroom was black as pitch, the storm pressing in against the windows like something alive. And for a moment I lay still, heart slamming, wondering if I had dreamed it. Then it rang again, sharp, insistent, cutting clean through the thunder's rumble, and I groped for the receiver with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be. Grandpa. The voice was tiny, frightened, nearly swallowed whole by the storm's static, as though it were coming to me from the bottom of a well rather than 40 minutes down the road. I pushed myself upright, shoving the heavy quilt back my joints, complaining at the sudden movement. Nadia, is that you? Grandpa, it is dark, and the thunder is so loud. Her voice hitched, caught on something between a sob and a gasp. I went to Mommy and Daddy's room, but they are not there. I looked in Caleb's room. He is not there either. The car is gone from the driveway, Grandpa. Why didn't they wake me up? Did I do something bad? The blood in my veins went ice cold. Nadia was 7 years old. My son Darnell and his wife Renee lived 40 minutes away in the upscale subdivision of Ballantine, a house I had put the down payment on, a house I had helped wire and paint and furnish because I believed in giving a young family a solid start. I forced my voice into something measured, something that would not betray the cold fury already pooling in my chest. Are you absolutely sure they are not somewhere in the house, baby girl? Sometimes people step outside, or I looked everywhere, Grandpa. Her voice broke on the word. The closet is empty. Mommy's big suitcases are gone. The good ones, the hard ones she only uses for trips. I am scared. The thunder keeps getting louder, and I do not know what to do. I was already on my feet. Stay on the phone with me, Nadia. I am coming right now. Do not hang up. Do you hear me? Do not hang up for any reason. I scrambled across the dark bedroom, yanking on my trousers and a heavy coat, moving with a speed that surprised even me. I grabbed my keys off the hook by the door. The crowbar I kept by the back entrance, I snatched it without thinking, some older instinct taking over, and I burst out into the downpour before the screen door had finished swinging shut behind me. The rain was falling in solid sheets, the kind of rain that turns dirt roads to rivers and washes out low bridges. My old Chevy pickup roared to life, and I tore out onto the main road, leaving speed limits behind, like something I had already outgrown. Grandpa, are you there? Nadia's voice came through the Bluetooth, barely a whimper now, barely a sound at all. I am here, Nadia. I am in the truck. I am driving fast. You just keep talking to me, okay? Tell me exactly where you are right now, this moment. I am in the kitchen pantry. A long pause filled with the sound of her trembling. "I have Captain Patches with me. I found him on my bed and I brought him. But the lights went out a little while ago, and it is so dark in here, Grandpa. I do not like the dark when the thunder is so loud. You hold Captain Patches tight, honey. Squeeze him hard. I will be there in 20 minutes, I promise you. You just keep talking to me and I will keep talking back." I pressed the accelerator to the floor. The windshield wipers thrashed back and forth in a losing fight against the storm, and the headlights carved barely a tunnel through the dark. My mind was racing harder than the engine running the numbers, replaying the past 2 days with the cold precision of a man who has spent 4 decades reading contracts and catching lies buried in the fine print. 2 days ago, Darnell had sat across my kitchen table with that look he always wore when he needed something. Head slightly bowed, voice careful and soft, the performance of a humble man. He told me things were tight. Work had slowed. Renee was under some stress. He said there was a crack in the foundation of the house that was getting worse, that a structural engineer had looked at it and shaken his head, that if they didn't fix it soon, the whole corner of the basement could cave. He asked for $10,000. I handed it over without blinking, because that is what fathers do. That is what I had always done, steadied the ground beneath the people I loved when they couldn't hold it steady themselves. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until my knuckles went the color of old ash. He took the money. He took his wife. He took his biological son, Caleb, and he left Nadia behind. Nadia had come to them 3 years ago at 4 years old. Through the adoption process, Renee had turned into a social media event. The photos were everywhere for weeks, Renee beaming Darnell with his arm around her little Nadia in a new dress, looking wide-eyed and cautious and uncertain in the way children are when they've already learned that good things can be taken back. The comments poured in. "Forever family? What a blessing. You are angels." Thousands of likes. Dozens of brand partnerships built on the story of their open hearts. But I had watched the way things worked off camera. Caleb got the new electronics. Nadia got the hand-me-downs. Caleb got the private tutors. Nadia got the household chores. Caleb got taken on weekend trips. Nadia got left at home with a babysitter who sometimes didn't show. I had told myself it was an adjustment period. I had told myself it would level out in time. I had made every excuse a man can make when the truth is something he does not want to look at directly. This was not an adjustment period. This was criminal. I fishtailed into the Ballantine subdivision, blowing past the manicured lawns and the gated driveways, and pulled up hard in front of Darnell's house. It was pitch black, not a single light burning, not in the foyer, not on the porch, not anywhere. A tomb sitting in the middle of the storm with a child locked inside it. I jumped out before the truck had fully stopped rocking, the rain soaking me to the bone before I'd taken 3 steps. I ran to the front door and punched in the entry code Darnell had given me years ago. Error. I tried again, more carefully. Error. They had changed it. They had changed the code on a house I put the down payment on, locking me out of the place the same night they locked her in. I hammered on the solid oak door with my fist. "Nadia, Nadia, I am here!" But the thunder swallowed my voice whole. I ran to the patio doors at the back. Locked. The kitchen window on the side of the house. Locked. I pressed my face to the glass and saw nothing but shadows and the thin blue glow of a microwave clock reading 2:47 in the morning. Panic was clawing at my chest now. Not the soft panic of an old man frightened by a storm, but the savage panic of something protective, something that has been caged too long and has finally broken loose. A 75-year-old heart was not built for this kind of punishment. But adrenaline, it turns out, does not check your age before it kicks the door open. I remembered the crowbar in my hand. I did not hesitate. I did not stop to think about property damage or consequences or what the neighbors might hear. I planted my feet on the wet brick and swung the crowbar with every ounce of strength a man accumulates over a lifetime of loading cargo ships, turning soil-building fences, all of it channeled into one single blow. The kitchen window shattered. The sound of it was swallowed almost instantly by a crack of thunder so loud the whole house seemed to shudder. The security alarm erupted a half-second later, a piercing, relentless shriek that tore through the night and set dogs barking 3 streets over. I knocked the jagged shards from the frame, not caring when they caught against my coat, not caring about anything except the child on the other side of that wall. I climbed through into the kitchen, my boots crunching over broken glass. "Nadia!" I roared, my voice cutting through the alarms, screaming. "Nadia! I am inside! I am here!" I swept through the kitchen, moving fast. The pantry door was shut. I crossed to it and wrenched it open, and there in the far corner, wedged between a 50-pound bag of rice and a tower of canned goods, was a small figure in purple pajamas. She was clutching a worn brown teddy bear so tightly her small knuckles had gone white. She was shaking so hard her teeth were audibly chattering, her whole body shuddering as though the thunder was running through her instead of around her. "Oh, Grandpa." The sound that came out of her was not quite a cry and not quite a scream. It was something rawer than either. She threw herself at me. I caught her and dropped to my knees on the cold tile floor, pulling her in close, feeling the terrible heat of her skin, even through my soaked coat. She was burning up. The fever had her in its grip, turning her small face red and her eyes glassy and distant. "I got you, baby. I got you now. I have you." I held her there for a long moment, my knees aching on the tile, the alarm still screaming overhead, the rain hammering at the broken window. Then I gathered myself. I carried her out of the pantry, crossed to the wall keypad, and beat it with the crowbar until the screaming finally stopped. The silence that descended was thick and complete, and almost sacred. I stood in that kitchen in the dark and let my eyes adjust. The room was spotless, unnervingly, obsessively spotless. Not a dish in the sink, not a crumb on the counter. They had cleaned the house before they left for their vacation, the same way people tidy up before going somewhere they intend to stay for a while. On the granite island, lit up faintly by the glow of a faraway lightning flash, lay a single sheet of paper written in Renee's looping calligraphic handwriting, the kind she used for thank you cards and captions. "Nadia, Mommy and Daddy and Caleb have to go on a very important business trip for work. It was a big emergency, and we could not wake you up. There are crackers in the pantry and juice boxes in the fridge. Do not open the door for anyone. The cameras are on so we can see you. Be a good girl. We will be back in a few days. Love, Mommy." I read it twice. I read the smiley face she had drawn beside her name, and in the shadows of that dark kitchen, it looked less like warmth and more like a taunt. Business trip, big emergency, be a good girl. She had left a note for a 7-year-old child the way you leave instructions for a house sitter. She had left crackers and juice boxes the way you leave kibble for a dog. My eyes drifted along the counter. Next to the note sat a crumpled ball of paper that had not quite made it into the trash can close, but not quite the way careless people miss things when they are in a hurry to get to their vacation. I smoothed it out against the granite with my free hand, while Nadia pressed her hot face into my neck. It was a receipt, printed yesterday morning. Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. Guest names Darnell Caldwell, Renee Vance, Caleb Caldwell. Room type family suite. Total cost $10,500. Date of departure today. There was no business trip. There was no emergency. There had never been a cracked foundation. My son had taken the $10,000 I handed him across my kitchen table, the money meant to shore up his family's home, the money I had wired that same morning from my own emergency fund, and he had used it to book a luxury cruise for himself and his wife and his biological son. And then they had locked the door from the outside, changed the code so I couldn't get in, and sailed away into warm blue water, while a 7-year-old girl with a fever sat alone in a pantry during a thunderstorm, clutching a teddy bear and wondering what she had done wrong. I looked down at Nadia. She was wheezing softly now, each small breath carrying a faint rattle that made something cold move through my chest. The heat of her fever was radiating right through her pajamas, warming my forearm where I held her. They left her to die, not in a moment of panic, not in a moment of oversight, in a moment of planning, of deliberate, calculated decision. They had packed the Louis Vuitton suitcases. They had left the note. They had changed the code. They had chosen. I crushed the receipt slowly in my fist, feeling the paper's edge cut into my palm, not registering the pain. "Grandpa," Nadia whispered against my neck, her voice thin and exhausted. "Are they coming back?" I looked at that note one more time. I looked at the smiley face. No baby girl. I said, my voice coming out low and flat and absolutely steady, the voice of a man who has made a decision that will not be unmade. "We are not waiting for them to come back." I carried her toward the door. "We are going to find them." I carried her out to the truck, buckled her in, and wrapped her in the emergency blanket I kept behind the seat. I did not call the police. Not yet. The police would put Nadia in Child Protective Services while they opened an investigation. No, this was personal. This was family business, and I was going to handle it the way I had always handled everything, with precision and overwhelming force. I dialed a number I hadn't touched in years. "Dr. Okafor," I said when he picked up, voice thick with sleep. "Get your bag. I am bringing Nadia to you. She has a fever and I need her cleared to travel." "Travel? Where are you going, Ezra, at 3 o'clock in the morning?" I glanced at the crumpled cruise receipt on the passenger seat. "We are going to Nassau," I said. "I have a ship to catch." Raymond Okafor had been my friend for 40 years, ever since we worked the docks together before he went off to medical school at night. He arrived at the farm 10 minutes later, rain still dripping from his hat. His face drained of color the moment he saw Nadia on my couch. He pressed his stethoscope to her chest, his frown deepening. "It is pneumonia, Ezra. Mild for now, but her lungs are congested. The fever is dangerous, but that is not what worries me most." He motioned me into the kitchen. "She is in shock. Her heart rate is erratic. She is showing signs of acute psychological trauma. Abandonment tears the mind apart. She needs medication rest, and above everything else, she needs to feel safe." Safe. The word turned to ash on my tongue. "I need you to stay with her, Raymond," I said. "I have to go back to that house." He studied my face, reading what lay behind my eyes. "Do not do anything that will take you away from her, Ezra. She needs you, not an avenger. She will have both." The drive back to Darnell's house was a different thing entirely from the desperate sprint that had brought me there the first time. The panic had burned itself clean away, leaving behind something colder and more useful, a forensic clarity sharp and steady as a surgeon's blade. My hands rested easy on the steering wheel. My pulse had dropped to a slow, deliberate drumbeat. I wasn't rushing anymore. I wasn't a frightened grandfather tearing through a storm. I was a man who had spent 4 decades reading the fine print in contracts that moved millions of dollars across oceans, and I was hunting. I let myself into Nadia's room first. It was on the ground floor, tucked far from the master suite, and from Caleb's room upstairs, a placement that said everything about how she was regarded in that household, without a single word needing to be spoken. I stood in the doorway for a moment and took it in. No posters on the walls, no color anywhere, just white paint and a window with a thin curtain the wind had pushed crooked. A bed, a dresser with a cracked handle on the second drawer, and a small stack of library books on the floor, because there was no bookshelf to put them on. In 3 years, nobody had bothered to put up a bookshelf. I packed her clothes quickly, folded them the way Loretta used to fold things with care, as though the folding itself mattered. I found her inhaler on the nightstand and tucked it into the side pocket of the bag, where I would be able to reach it fast if I needed to. Then I went upstairs. Caleb's room was a monument to excess, so complete it almost made me laugh. Gaming consoles, stacked 3 high wall-to-wall toys, still in their packaging, a television mounted above the dresser that was larger than anything in my living room. I didn't touch a thing. I moved on. The master bedroom was buried under a storm of discarded outfits and torn packing materials, sequined tops and silk blouses flung across every surface, tissue paper and shopping bags piled in the corners. It looked like vanity itself had torn through the place and left carnage behind. But I wasn't after clothes. I made straight for the closet where Darnell kept the server for the home security system, the same server I had built and installed myself years ago when I wired this house from the foundation up. He thought he had been clever when he changed the door entry code. He thought locking me out of the front door meant locking me out of everything. He forgot who had laid every cable in these walls. He forgot who held the admin override. I settled at the monitor and logged in. My fingers moved across the keyboard with a steadiness that surprised even me, and I scrolled backward through the footage to 11 o'clock the previous morning. I hit play. The grainy night vision image flickered on the living room, the front hallway, the door. And there was my son. Darnell, in a floral shirt that looked ridiculous on him, hauling 2 massive Louis Vuitton suitcases toward the exit, grinning at something over his shoulder. Renee came behind him, radiant in the particular way that women are radiant when they are about to get exactly what they want, touching up her lipstick in the hallway mirror, spinning a sun hat in her free hand, laughing that high, clear laugh she kept for moments when she was performing joy rather than feeling it. Caleb shot past both of them with a brand new Nintendo Switch tucked under his arm, still in its box. "Shh, buddy." Darnell held a finger to his lips, still grinning. "Got to be quiet. We don't want to wake up the house." Renee caught her reflection in the mirror and adjusted the angle of the sun hat. "Let her sleep," she said, her voice breezy and dismissive, the voice of a woman resolving a minor inconvenience. "It is better this way. Saves us the drama of explaining why she isn't coming." I watched Darnell's face on the screen. There was a hesitation there, a flicker brief and small, like a candle guttering before it steadies. "What about food?" he said. "What if she wakes up scared?" Renee rolled her eyes with a patience that was no patience at all. "She is 7, not 2. There are crackers in the pantry, and I left a note. Besides, old lady Pickering next door is always poking around. She'll see the lights go out and figure it out. She'll keep an eye on things." They never called Mrs. Pickering. They never knocked on her door or slipped a key under her mat or asked her to check in. They simply assumed that a 72-year-old retired librarian would somehow sense through the walls of 2 separate houses, in the middle of a storm, that a feverish child was sitting alone in a locked pantry. They built their exit strategy on that assumption, and then they walked out the door. I watched Darnell key the new code into the panel by the door. I watched him test the latch twice to make certain it had caught. He didn't just leave her. He made sure she couldn't leave either. He trapped her as deliberately as if he had turned a key in a lock, which in every way that mattered, he had. I stopped the footage. The video was enough to make a man's hands shake, but I needed more than images. Images could be questioned. Images could be contextualized and argued over by attorneys in rooms full of people paid to argue. I needed the paper trail, the kind of evidence that speaks in the cold, irrefutable language of numbers, the language I had spent a career learning to read. I found it in the wastebasket beside the vanity half buried under a used makeup wipe and a torn price tag. A crumpled credit card statement, not a card I recognized, not a card I had ever been told about. A joint account held entirely in the shadows, kept from me as deliberately as everything else. I smoothed it against the glass top of the dresser and ran my finger down the column of transactions. Royal Caribbean Cruise Line Family Suite, $10,500 paid 3 days ago. Neiman Marcus Luxury Luggage and Resort Apparel, $5,000 paid 2 days ago. Total expenditure in the space of 48 hours, $15,500. I closed my eyes. I let the arithmetic arrange itself the way it always did, with the cold, interlocking precision of a lock clicking open. 2 weeks ago, Darnell had come to me. Head-bowed voice carefully measured, wearing the face of a man ground down by worry. The foundation of the house was cracking, he told me. A structural engineer had come out and shaken his head. If they didn't act quickly, the whole corner of the basement could go. He was frightened for the children. He hated to ask. He asked for $15,000. I wired it the next morning without hesitation, wiping out the emergency repair fund I kept for the farm, because I believed without a shadow of a doubt that I was protecting my grandchildren's home. I wasn't protecting their home. I was funding their escape from it. I paid for those Louis Vuitton suitcases I had watched them drag toward the front door. I paid for the family suite they were sleeping in tonight on a ship somewhere in the Atlantic. I paid for the resort clothes and the new luggage and the first-class boarding experience. I paid in the most precise and literal sense for the very instrument of my granddaughter's abandonment, and there was no berth for Nadia on that reservation. I checked it twice. 3 names, 1 family suite, and not a single accommodation for the 4th member of the household. This was not a last-minute decision made in the chaos of packing. This was not a mistake born from poor judgment in a rushed moment. They had sat down, opened a browser, selected a cabin, entered 3 names, and processed the payment. They had decided in that specific moment of deliberate choosing that she would not come. They had decided long before they ever walked out the door. I pocketed the credit card statement and the cruise receipt. I pulled the hard drive from the security server and tucked it under my arm. Then I walked out of that master bedroom without pulling the door closed behind me. I left everything exactly as I had found it, the broken glass scattered across the kitchen floor, the alarm panel hanging from the wall in pieces, the pantry door still open to the dark. I left the note on the granite island with its monstrous little smiley face still smiling up at the ceiling. Let them come home to it. Let them walk through the front door of the life they had constructed and find it exactly as they had left it, except that the child they had abandoned would be gone and the evidence of what they had done would be waiting for them in the hands of a man they had badly, catastrophically underestimated. I climbed back into the Cadillac and sat for a moment in the dark driveway, listening to the rain taper off against the roof. The storm was moving through. The sky to the east was beginning to show the first gray suggestion of morning. I looked at the house I had put the down payment on, the house I had wired and helped furnish and written checks to maintain for 5 years, and I felt absolutely nothing for it. It was just wood and brick. It was not what mattered. What mattered was back at the farm, burning with fever, curled under a quilt that smelled of cedar and old memories, trusting me the way children trust the one person who has never yet let them down. I put the truck in gear and pulled away from the curb. I had everything I needed. Now I was going to use it. Back at the farm, Raymond met me at the door. She's sleeping. Her breathing's come back around. Did you get what you needed? I moved past him toward the landline and lifted the receiver. I dialed a number I had memorized long ago. A man who ran charter flights out of the private airfield south of the city. I'm going to take a trip, Raymond. I said, my voice flat as pavement. Pack your bag, doctor. You're coming with me. I need someone to watch over Nadia while I handle what needs handling. Handle your business. What exactly does that mean? My eyes dropped to the crumpled receipt in my hand. It means I'm going to foreclose on my son. The quiet inside that farmhouse was broken by a sound that cut deeper than the shattered glass from my son's kitchen window. Nadia was sitting upright on the sofa, the quilt bunched around her waist. Her small hands wrapped around a mug of warm broth Raymond had made for her. Her eyes, normally bright, were dark and hollowed by feverish exhaustion. "Grandpa," she whispered, and I leaned in close to catch the words. "Is it because I'm not real?" I went still. Raymond stopped cleaning his glasses. "What do you mean, baby girl?" I asked, lowering myself onto the edge of the coffee table. Mommy told her friend on the phone that having me was good for her brand, but that sometimes it was hard because I'm not her real daughter. Is that why they left me, because I'm not real like Caleb? The air went out of the room. It felt like a fist had closed around my heart until it quit. This was the rot I'd been sensing beneath Renee's curated smiles. But I never thought they'd let a child carry that. They had made her feel like a prop, an accessory you tuck back on the shelf when vacation rolls around. I reached out and took her hands in mine. "You listen to me, Nadia. You are the most real thing in this entire family. Blood makes you related, but loyalty is what makes you family. And those two don't have a single drop of loyalty between them." She looked up at me, searching for the lie, and found nothing but hard iron truth. "Go back to sleep, baby girl. When you wake up, things will be different." She let her eyes close the medicine, pulling her under. I stood and looked at Raymond. He was shaking his head slowly. "They broke her, Ezra." "They didn't break her," I answered, already moving. "They just woke me up." I went into my bedroom and locked the door behind me. The room was dark and quiet, the storm still muttering at the windows, and I stood in the middle of it for a moment, with my wet coat dripping onto the floorboards. 15 years. That was how long I had played the part. Flannel shirts worn soft at the elbows, the beat-up Chevy with the cracked dashboard mending fences at dawn, growing food. I didn't need to grow, because a man has to do something with his hands when he steps away from the kind of work that once consumed every waking hour. I had built the fiction carefully and maintained it without complaint. I let Darnell believe I was nothing more than a pensioner scraping by on Social Security and modest savings, that his inheritance would amount to a few acres of Carolina soil and an old farmhouse that needed a new roof. I did it because I wanted him to become his own man. I wanted him to build something, to earn something, to understand what it meant, to carry weight, rather than simply ride on the shoulders of the man who had always carried it for him. I thought the performance of poverty would teach him the value of effort. I thought removing the safety net from his sight, while keeping it quietly in place below him, was an act of wisdom. I was wrong. I had not removed the safety net. I had simply hidden it. And a man who knows the net is there, even if he cannot see it, never truly learns what it means to fall. I crossed the room to the large oil painting of Loretta that hung on the far wall, her in a green dress, the summer we spent in Savannah. The summer before everything became about work and building and moving freight across the Atlantic. I swung the painting outward on its hinge. Behind it sat the wall safe, just as it had always sat, undisturbed and unremarkable, exactly where I had installed it the year we moved in. I spun the dial from memory. Left, right, left. The tumblers landed with a satisfying heavy thud, the sound of something substantial and real, and the door swung open. Inside was the life Darnell knew absolutely nothing about. Stacks of bonds arranged by maturity date the way I had always arranged them. Deeds to 11 properties I had quietly accumulated across 3 states over the course of 2 decades. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention, just solid assets sitting patiently in the dark, appreciating. A folded copy of the will Conrad Whitfield had last updated 2 years ago, and in the corner in a small velvet box that had not been opened in 5 years a card, not plastic. Anodized titanium black as a held breath with my name raised across the face of it in letters you could feel with your thumb. The American Express Centurion card. Invitation only. No preset spending limit. I had received it the year I closed the merger that moved $340 million of freight contracts from 3 failing regional carriers into a single operation that I then ran for 11 years. I had used it perhaps a dozen times over the course of my career, and then when I stepped away from all of it, I had placed it in this box and closed the lid. I had kept it the way a retired soldier keeps a sidearm, not because he expects to use it, but because there are situations a man cannot predict, and preparation is not the same thing as paranoia. I ran my thumb across the raised letters of my name. The card was cool and heavy and exactly as I remembered it. This was an emergency. I slipped it into the inside breast pocket of nothing because I had nothing yet worth putting it into. First things first. I went to the closet and pushed past the denim and the flannel and the heavy canvas work jackets until my hands found the garment bag hanging at the very back, pressed against the wall, sealed against the cedar and the dust. It had not seen daylight since Loretta's funeral. I unzipped it slowly. The suit was British bespoke midnight wool cut for me in London by a tailor on Savile Row who had taken 3 fittings to get the shoulders exactly right. It smelled of cedar and of something older than Cedar Authority perhaps, or the particular confidence of a man who had walked into rooms where the stakes were very high and walked out having gotten what he came for. I laid it across the bed and looked at it for a moment. Then I stripped off my wet mud-caked clothes and left them on the floor. I scrubbed my hands and face at the basin until the grime was gone and my skin felt raw and clean. I shaved the stubble close with a steady hand, the razor moving in long, deliberate strokes. And when I looked up at the mirror, I began to see something emerging from beneath the farmer's weathered surface, something older and sharper, something that had been patient for 15 years and was done being patient now. I dressed carefully. The shirt first, then the trousers with their perfect break. The silk tie, deep burgundy tied with a Windsor knot that sat centered and clean at my throat. The gold cufflinks Loretta had given me on the morning of our 30th anniversary, the ones engraved with my initials on the back, where nobody could see them but me. The hand-stitched leather Oxfords that had walked the floors of boardrooms from Charlotte to Rotterdam. I put the Centurion card in the breast pocket. I straightened the jacket and looked at myself in the full-length mirror on the back of the closet door. The farmer was gone. There was no trace of him, not in the posture, not in the eyes, not in the set of the jaw. What stood in that mirror was the man I had been before the flannel and the fences. The man who had once restructured a failing conglomerate in 90 days and made the board of directors feel grateful for the experience. The man Darnell had never known existed, because I had taken great care to make sure he didn't, and that had been my greatest mistake. Tonight I was going to begin correcting it. I picked up my phone and dialed. Cabarrus Aviation, Vernon speaking. Shut Vernon. It's Ezra Caldwell. I said my name the way I used to say it in those rooms, not loudly, not with any performance of importance, but with the quiet weight of a man who does not need volume to be heard. There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause that means someone is sitting up straighter. Mr. Caldwell, it has been a long time, sir. I figured you were out of the game. I was Vernon. I've got a situation that requires I come back to it briefly. I need an aircraft, and I need it now. Nassau. I need speed, not a propeller plane. A jet. As it happens, I have a Gulfstream G650 sitting on the tarmac right now, prepped for a charter that canceled 2 hours ago. Fueled flight plan, filed crew standing by. Wheels up in 45 minutes if you can be here. I'll take it. That's a significant last-minute rate, Mr. Caldwell. I want to be straightforward with you about. Put it on the account, Vernon. The black card is still active. A brief silence. Then, with the particular efficiency of a man who understands that some conversations are already finished. We'll have the crew ready, sir. Safe travels. I ended the call. I picked up Nadia's packed bag from the chair by the door. I looked around the bedroom one last time at the oil painting of Loretta swung back into place, at the wet clothes on the floor, at the ordinary quiet room that had housed 15 years of careful disguise. Then I walked out of it, and I did not look back. I walked back into the living room. Raymond looked up, and his jaw dropped. He rose slowly, taking in the suit the way I was carrying myself. Ezra, he breathed. I haven't seen you carry yourself like that since the merger in '98. The merger is done, Raymond, I said, picking up Nadia's packed bag. This is a hostile takeover. I gathered Nadia into my arms. She stirred, but didn't fully wake, curling into the wool of my jacket. We walked out into the early morning light, the storm scrubbed clean. I didn't head for the Chevy. I went to the garage where the Cadillac DeVille sat under a tarp. Bulletproof. A V8 under that hood that could leave Darnell's leased BMW in the dust. I settled Nadia into the back seat. Raymond took the front. Darnell thinks I'm a broke old man, I said as I pulled onto the highway. He thinks he raided my retirement account to fund a cruise. He thinks he's already won. The Cadillac ran smooth and quiet as a panther. He forgot who it was that taught him how to count. He forgot that before I was a farmer, I was the man who wrote the checks. Nadia stirred in the back. She blinked open, taking in the leather interior and the cut of my suit. Grandpa, you look fancy. Where are we going? I found her eyes in the rearview mirror. We're going to get justice, baby girl. Get some more sleep. When you open your eyes again, we'll be up in the sky. The Gulfstream touched down at Lyndon Pindling International Airport, with enough force to rattle the ice in my water glass, but I didn't lose a single drop. I set the glass back on the armrest and looked out through the oval window as the runway lights streaked past and the engines wound down from their roar to a low, settling whine. Nassau. The air outside shimmered with early morning heat. Even at this hour, the tarmac already radiating the warmth it had collected the day before, palm trees visible beyond the terminal fence, bending lazily in a wind that carried nothing of the storm we had left behind in Carolina. Playground of the wealthy. Current address of my son and his stolen holiday. We had beaten the ship here, that was the thing that mattered. Vernon had pushed those engines as hard as they would go, and the Gulfstream had answered the way good machinery answers when you ask everything of it. The Royal Caribbean vessel carrying Darnell and Renee was only now beginning its slow, heavy approach to the cruise terminal miles across the water, creeping toward the dock with the unhurried confidence of something that has never needed to hurry. I could see the white shape of it in the distance through the window, catching the early light, looking from this far away, like a floating city that belonged to a different world than the one I had left 6 hours ago. We had time. Not much of it, but enough for a man who knows how to move. Raymond was quiet beside me as we descended the air stairs and walked to the hired car waiting on the tarmac. He had been quiet for most of the flight, watching me with the careful attention of a physician monitoring a patient whose vital signs are technically stable, but whose eyes are doing something the chart does not account for. He waited until we were in the car and moving before he spoke. "Do you have a plan for getting on that ship, Ezra?" He kept his voice, even the voice he used when he wanted to ask a hard question, without sounding like he was asking a hard question. You can't walk onto a cruise liner like you're boarding a city bus. Post 9/11 maritime security is locked down in ways that don't bend for charm or a good story. They have protocols. I helped write those protocols, Raymond. I was watching the port facilities come into view through the windshield, the cranes and the container yards, and the long white shed of the passenger terminal with its flags snapping in the morning breeze. Now let's go find out if they still follow them. The cruise terminal was organized chaos of the particular variety that descends on port facilities when a large ship is incoming and several hundred passengers are already waiting to board for the next leg. Taxis and tour buses competing for curb space vendors with carts of straw hats and cold drinks, working the queues families with too much luggage moving in every direction at once, and none of them the right one. I steered us through it without breaking stride, Nadia's hand in mine, Raymond keeping pace at my shoulder, moving toward the Port Authority office rather than the passenger check-in lines. The security officer who stepped into my path was broad through the chest and wore his uniform with the particular confidence of a man accustomed to being the largest obstacle in any given situation. He took one look at me, at all of us, and made a rapid calculation that landed, as these calculations often do, in the wrong place entirely. "Sir, you are not authorized back here. Passenger check-in is back that way." He gestured toward the long, sun-baked queues behind us, with the practiced ease of someone who has delivered this line several hundred times. "I'm not a passenger yet," I said. "I need to see the port director." "The director is occupied. Unless you're carrying a badge or a scheduled appointment, I need you to turn yourself around and join the line like everyone else." I glanced at his name tag. "Officer Trent. I understand you are doing your job, and I have no quarrel with that. My name is Ezra Caldwell. I spent 30 years moving freight through these waters, container freight, bulk, cargo, specialized maritime logistics across the full length of the Caribbean basin. I helped negotiate the dredging contracts that deepened this harbor to the point where a vessel the size of the one currently approaching that terminal can dock here at all." I paused just long enough to let that settle. "Now I am going to ask you one more time respectfully to open that door." The officer's expression did not change. "Look, old man, I don't care if you built the harbor yourself and named it after your mother. No ticket, no entry. Step aside or I involve the local police. Your choice." I felt Nadia's grip on my hand tighten. I glanced down at her and saw it in her eyes, the flicker of a child who has learned through long and painful experience that authority figures tend to win these exchanges. She thought we were losing ground. She was already preparing herself for the disappointment. I gently released her hand, passed her without a word to Raymond, who gathered her close with the instinct of a man who has spent 40 years understanding what people need before they ask for it. I turned back to Officer Trent, and then I stopped speaking English. I shifted into Spanish. Not the careful textbook Spanish of a man who studied it in school, but the working dialect of the Caribbean trade routes, the particular cadence and vocabulary of dock offices and harbor master meetings from Miami to Cartagena to Barranquilla. The language I had conducted business in for 3 decades across these same waters. It came out of me the way things come out when they have been stored for a long time in a deep place, fast and fluent, and carrying a weight that had nothing to do with volume. "Get Director Delgado on the phone right now. Tell him the ghost of Charlotte is here. Tell him if that door is not open in 10 seconds, I will be on the line with his superiors at the Maritime Commission before that ship finishes docking, and I will spend the next hour reminding them in considerable detail about certain containers that went missing from this port in 1998, and the paperwork that was never quite completed to everyone's satisfaction." The effect was immediate and complete. The confidence drained from Officer Trent's face the way color drains from a man who has just realized he has made a serious miscalculation about who exactly he is dealing with. He did not know who I was, but he recognized the tone of a man who does not make threats, who states outcomes, who has the standing to deliver on everything he has just said. The officer reached for the phone on the wall behind him. He murmured into it, listened, nodded once, and then again. He replaced the receiver and looked at me with an expression that had shed every trace of its earlier dismissiveness. "Director Delgado will see you now, Mr. Caldwell. Right through that door." "Thank you, Officer Trent." I reached back for Nadia's hand, and she took it. And as we walked through the door, she tilted her face up toward mine with her eyes wide and bright behind the oversized pink sunglasses. "Grandpa," she whispered with a reverence that almost made me smile. "You speak Spanish. You sounded like someone from a movie." I looked down at her. "I speak the language of getting things done, baby girl." She considered this for a moment, with the seriousness that children bring to information they intend to keep. Then she nodded, satisfied, and walked beside me through the door and into whatever came next. Director Delgado was a man close to my age, silver at the temples, wearing a suit that had cost more than my truck. He was on his feet before I'd fully entered the room. "Ezra Caldwell. It's been 20 years. I assumed you were retired." "I was Hector. Retirement didn't hold. My son is on that ship. He has my money. He abandoned my granddaughter. I need to be aboard before it leaves port." Delgado turned to his computer. "Ezra, the manifest is locked. The ship is at capacity. I can't simply add passengers to a full vessel. There's always one cabin held back the owner's suite, the one reserved for the CEO, the high rollers. Is it being used?" Delgado paused. "It's sitting empty. But Ezra, the rate. It's not a standard booking. It runs $25,000 for the balance of the voyage. Cash or wire up front." I reached into my inner breast pocket and produced the titanium Centurion card. I set it down on his desk with a clean, solid clack. "Run it. And add a gratuity for your staff to push the paperwork through in 5 minutes." Delgado looked at the card. He looked at me. He looked at Nadia pressed against my leg. A slow smile spread across his face. "The ghost of Charlotte is definitely back." 10 minutes later, we were moving down the VIP gangway. A crew member in crisp white led the way, carrying a silver tray apple juice for Nadia, champagne for Raymond and me. We went right past the long queues, bypassed the security checkpoints, and walked straight onto the ship into an air-conditioned atrium that smelled of expensive perfume and old money. We rode the glass elevator to deck 17. The owner's suite, 1,400 square feet of marble and mahogany, a private balcony overlooking the Atlantic. I lifted Nadia up so she could see past the railing. Far below on the main gangway, there was Darnell, that ridiculous floral shirt, wrestling the Louis Vuitton suitcases, sweating in the heat. Renee stood beside him, fanning herself, shouting at Caleb, who was crying. "They look hot," Nadia said quietly. "They are hot, and they are about to get a whole lot hotter." That evening, after I had briefed Raymond on everything, the footage, the receipts, the credit card statement, the arithmetic of exactly how thoroughly my son had robbed me while asking me to trust him, I stepped out onto the balcony alone and closed the glass door behind me. The Atlantic stretched away in every direction, black and vast and indifferent, the ship's wake, a pale ribbon dissolving into nothing. I stood at the railing for a moment and let the salt air settle around me. Then I took out my phone and dialed. "In Conrad Whitfield here." The voice that came through was crisp and unhurried. The voice of a man who has received late calls from important people for so many years that the hour no longer registers as unusual. Conrad Whitfield was more than an attorney. He was a weapon in a tailored suit, The man who had stood beside me in every significant corporate battle of my career, who understood not just the law, but the precise application of it, the way a surgeon understands not just the instrument, but exactly where to cut. 30 years of navigating trenches together. He knew my voice the way he knew the sound of a file being opened. Put the nuclear option on the table, Conrad. I'm sending you an audio file. Play it start to finish before you do anything else. After that, I need 3 things moving simultaneously: a restraining order, an emergency custody petition for Nadia Caldwell, and a full forensic audit of every dollar Darnell has received from me going back to the beginning. Every wire transfer, every check, every informal arrangement. All of it documented and sourced. Understood. And beyond the custody matter, the mortgage on Darnell's house. Track down who holds that note. A brief pause, the sound of a man who already knows the answer and is deciding how to frame it. You do, Ezra. You acquired it through the shell company 3 years ago when he went into default and didn't tell you about it until he had no other options. Title sits entirely with you. He has been making payments irregularly against a note he doesn't realize you own. Begin foreclosure proceedings tonight. File the eviction paperwork simultaneously. I want new locks on the doors by tomorrow morning and the sheriff's department notified. Freeze every financial instrument connected to either of their names that has any relationship to my accounts. The supplementary credit cards, cancel them immediately and report them compromised. The BMW, the lease, is under my co-signature. Cancel it tonight and send someone to collect the vehicle from wherever it's parked. There was a pause on the line. Not hesitation. Conrad Whitfield did not hesitate. It was the pause of a man making certain he had heard everything correctly before he responded. Ezra, that is a scorched earth position. You understand what you're describing. They step off that ship and walk into nothing. No roof, no vehicle, no available credit, no accounts. Nothing. I turned to face the water. I thought about a pantry door wrenched open in the dark. A small girl in purple pajamas burning up with fever, shaking so hard her teeth were chattering, clutching a worn teddy bear and asking me if she had done something bad. I thought about milk him until he's dry spoken in Renee's voice with the casual confidence of a woman discussing a financial instrument rather than a human being. I let those things sit in my chest for a moment, and I examined what was there alongside them, and I found no guilt and no uncertainty, only the clean, settled knowledge of a man who has finally stopped being patient. They are not without shelter, Conrad. They have a perfectly comfortable cabin on this ship for 12 more days. When that voyage ends, the ship will dock and the door will open and they will walk out into the life that corresponds to every choice they have made. I want that life waiting for them at the bottom of the gangway, stripped to zero. The papers will be filed within the hour. House sealed by noon tomorrow. One more thing. The will. I need it redrafted entirely tonight, if possible tomorrow morning at the absolute latest. Everything I have, the properties, the bonds, the accounts, all of it flows into a protected trust for Nadia Caldwell. You serve as executor and trustee until her 25th birthday, at which point full control transfers to her without condition. Darnell receives $1. I paused. Write that plainly, Conrad. Not buried in language, not softened. $1 stated clearly, so that he can never stand in front of a judge and claim it was an oversight or an error, or that I simply forgot to include him. So that he understands when he reads it that I saw exactly what he was and made my decision with full knowledge and a clear mind. I'll see to it, Ezra. It will be done. I ended the call. I stood at the railing a moment longer, phone in my hand, looking out at the black water moving beneath the hull. I examined myself carefully, the way I had learned to do in the years when the decisions I made affected thousands of people, and I could not afford to be wrong about my own motivations. No guilt, no grief, no second thoughts reaching up from somewhere below the surface to complicate what I had just set in motion. Only the clean, quiet sensation of a deadbolt dropping into place. The sound of something being finally, irrevocably secured. I went back inside. Nadia was asleep in the wide bed, one arm around the new doll, her breathing slow, and even the fever broken at last. I lowered myself into the armchair by the window and watched her chest rise and fall in the dark. The call was made. The machinery was moving. All that remained now was the morning. Inside, Nadia had curled up on the wide bed, impossibly small, against all that white Egyptian cotton. I lowered myself into the armchair and stayed there watching her chest rise and fall. My son had been waiting on an inheritance. I intended to deliver one. The inheritance of every choice he had ever made, and I would collect interest on every single cent. The first move in the psychological campaign was a bottle of vintage Bordeaux, absurdly priced, precisely the sort of label Renee photographed for her followers, but couldn't actually tell from the cheapest bottle on the shelf. I settled at the mahogany desk and composed a note on ship stationery, using my left hand. 4 lines. That was all it needed. Drink up. It is the last luxury you will taste. Tomorrow the well runs dry. The foundation. I worked the note beneath the ribbon around the bottle's neck. Tobias, I said to our butler, passing it across. Stateroom 804. No sender. Knock once, set it outside the door, walk away. I retrieved the listening device and positioned it. I had linked Darnell's Apple ID to my old iPad weeks before he recycled the same password everywhere. His texts fed straight to my screen. Right on schedule, 10 minutes after delivery, a message lit up from him to Renee. Babe. Did you order wine? I fitted the earbud and picked up the audio from the tracker I'd buried in their luggage at the pool earlier. Vintage Bordeaux. This has to be the cruise line welcoming us. The gold membership pays off. Renee's voice, thin but readable. There is a note. Darnell's voice. Something off in it already. Paper rustling, then silence. What does it mean? Renee asked, the brightness curdling. The foundation, Ren. The money. The money I took from Dad. So what, he is sitting up in North Carolina? There is no way he knows. Maybe the contractor reached out to him. Maybe the wire got flagged. Or I borrowed from people before I went to Dad. Loan sharks. Maybe they found out I burned through it. You are making up ghosts. Listen to how ridiculous you sound. A loan shark doesn't slip wine under your door on a cruise ship. He breaks your legs in a parking lot. This is a delivery mix-up. Somebody in a suite above us ordered it, and the steward got confused. We just got a free $300 bottle. But that note, the well runs dry, that is not something you write by accident. Oh, it is a metaphor, Darnell. Pour the glass and stop manufacturing a crisis. I heard the clink. She was actually drinking it, savoring the wine I had sent as a death notice for everything she owned, and calling it good fortune. I pulled the earbud free. Phase 1 done. Darnell was already coming apart. But Renee was still cocooned in her armor of denial. I needed a crack in that armor. I needed her to understand this wasn't about money, this was about a child. I looked at Nadia. She was on the floor, cross-legged, playing with a doll I had picked up in the gift shop. Nadia, baby, can Grandpa borrow your doll for a little while? I need to take it somewhere. Will you bring it back, Grandpa? I promise, just a short errand. She placed it in my hands without hesitation, her trust in me complete and unquestioning. I waited until midnight. The ship had gone still, the noise migrated up to the nightclubs. I rode the service elevator down wearing maintenance coveralls I'd lifted from a laundry cart cap pulled low. Corridor of deck 8802, 803, 804. Through the thin door came the faint murmur of a television. I took the doll and tied a small red ribbon in a bow around its neck, identical to the one Nadia used to wear on the day they finalized her adoption, the day Renee photographed every moment and captioned it Mommy's Little Present. I set the doll on the doormat, eyes up facing the door. Patient, accusing. Then I knocked. 3 firm raps. I turned the corner at a measured pace and slipped into the stairwell, easing the door to a crack. The door to 804 swung open. "Who's there?" Darnell's voice, thick with sleep, edged with irritation, a sharp intake of breath. "Renee, get out here, now." "What is it?" "Just look." Silence. A silence heavier and colder than anything before it. "Is that looks like Nadia's?" Darnell's voice, barely a sound. "That is the doll I gave her, the one she takes to bed with her." "What is it doing here?" "She probably packed it. It must have gotten mixed in with our bags." "Renee, it is sitting upright on the mat with a ribbon tied around its neck. Someone put it there deliberately. Someone is watching us." Darnell breathed. The whine, the note. Now this. Someone actually knows where we are. For the first time, Renee didn't wave him off. "Pick it up, get it inside." "I am not touching it. It's unsettling." A brief scuffle, then the door banged shut. The lock, the deadbolt, the chain. All 3 in quick succession. I stood in the dark stairwell and smiled. They were sealed inside a windowless room with a doll that put Nadia's face right in front of them, sipping stolen wine, beginning to understand that the width of an ocean was nowhere near enough to put between themselves and what they had done. At 3 in the morning, while the ship hummed around me, and Nadia slept with her arm around the new doll and the Atlantic moved dark and silent beneath the hull, I sat at the mahogany desk with my laptop open and went into the home security system remotely. I did not merely shut it down. I changed the admin password first, then swapped out the recovery email for one Darnell had never seen and could not access. Then I rerouted the 2-factor authentication to a number that existed only on a prepaid device sitting in the breast pocket of my jacket. Every door locked, every window sealed, every digital point of entry closed off and rekeyed from the inside. I locked him out of his own home, the same way he and Renee had locked Nadia in a pantry. It seemed appropriate. It seemed, in fact, exactly right. Then I closed the laptop, put in my earbud, and went to sleep in the armchair by the window with the audio feed from the tracker running quietly in my ear, waiting for morning. By 9 o'clock, the feed sharpened. I heard the particular sound of a man reaching the limit of his patience with a piece of technology, the tapping, the muttering, the escalating frustration of someone who cannot understand why a thing that has always worked has suddenly completely stopped working. It won't load. Darnell's voice cracked down the line, frayed at the edges, in a way that had nothing to do with the ship's Wi-Fi and everything to do with a man who had been lying badly for several days and was beginning to feel the weight of it. "It keeps throwing an authentication error. Says the password was changed 3 hours ago. Not changed by who?" Renee's voice jumped a full register. The brightness that had carried her through the first day of the cruise, the performative ease, the practiced radiance was gone, entirely replaced by something sharper and considerably less attractive. "Who is in that house, Darnell? Is it a burglar? Is it the police?" A pause in which I could hear her priorities arranging themselves in real time. "My jewelry is in the safe. My bags are in the walk-in closet. All of it, Darnell, all the new things. Not one thought for Nadia. Not one flicker of maternal instinct reaching toward the child they had sealed in a house and sailed away from. Her panic was clean and pure, and entirely devoted to handbags. I'll call the neighbor. She ordered the way she ordered everything, as though the idea had occurred to her, and the execution was someone else's problem. Call Mrs. Pickering. Have her look through the window. Norma Pickering was 72 years old, a retired school librarian with sharp eyes and a memory for detail that would have made her an exceptional attorney. She had lived next door to Darnell and Renee for 4 years. She had watched Renee arrange Caleb for photographs in the front yard, while Nadia played alone by the fence, visible in the background of those curated images as nothing more than a small, slightly blurred figure that didn't quite fit the composition. She had watched Nadia carry grocery bags that were too heavy for her small arms, while Renee talked on her phone in the driveway. She had developed over the course of those 4 years a very precise and very southern and very polished hatred for my daughter-in-law, the kind of hatred that is never spoken aloud in polite company, but expresses itself in the set of the jaw and the particular quality of silence that falls when a certain name is mentioned. When I had called her from the airplane somewhere over the dark expanse of the Atlantic and told her what had happened, all of it calmly and without embellishment, she had not gasped. She had not peppered me with questions or expressed the theatrical horror that most people reach for when confronted with something genuinely monstrous. She had simply listened until I finished, and then she had said in the measured tone of a woman who has already decided, "Tell me what you need from me, Ezra." I heard Darnell dial. He put it on speakerphone, whether from habit or because he wanted Renee to hear the reassurance he was expecting, I couldn't say. Mrs. Pickering, it's Darnell Caldwell from next door." His voice had shifted into a register. I recognized the careful, controlled warmth he deployed when he needed something from someone and wanted them to feel good about providing it. "We're having a little trouble with our security system remotely. It seems to have gone offline. I don't want to bother you, but I wondered if you might just glance over at the house when you get a chance. See if anything looks unusual. Any lights on anything like that." A long pause settled over the line. Long enough that Darnell drew a breath. Long enough that Renee in the background made a small, impatient sound. "Well, Darnell, honey." Mrs. Pickering's voice came through slowly, deliberately, with the unhurried cadence of a woman who has nowhere to be and nothing to prove. "It is funny that you should call when you did, as a matter of fact. I was standing at my kitchen window not 10 minutes ago, just having my second cup looking out at the morning, and I noticed that your house is completely dark over there. Not a single light burning anywhere, not even the porch light you usually leave on." Another pause. This one weighted differently, carrying something beneath it. "But that isn't what has me concerned, Darnell. That isn't the part that's been sitting with me." "What do you mean?" His voice tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, I stepped outside to fetch my newspaper. You know I still get the paper. I know nobody does anymore, but I like it. And I stood there on the front step for a minute, the way you do in the morning, just getting the air. And I could have sworn I heard something coming from inside your house. Through the walls, you understand. It wasn't loud, but it was crying, Darnell. The sound of a little child crying. And I thought to myself, that sounds just like little Nadia. It sounded just like her little voice. A beat of perfect silence. But that cannot be right, can it, dear? Because you told me, I'm sure you told me, that you all were going away together. That you were taking the children on a trip. So it couldn't be Nadia in there. Unless, Lord forbid, someone has broken in. It sounded like she was calling out for her grandpa. The pause that followed was exquisite in its precision. Would you like me to ring the police, dear, just to have someone go by and check? I would not want to overstep, but it did sound awfully distressing. No. The word came out of Darnell too fast and too loud, the sound of a man grabbing at something that is already past his reach. No, Mrs. Pickering, please, please don't do that. It must have been the television. We probably left it running when we went out, and with the power situation, it likely reset to something loud. There is absolutely nobody in that house, I can assure you. Please don't bother the police. We would not want to put anyone out over nothing. Well, if you say so, dear. Her tone was perfectly pleasant, perfectly unconvinced. You know best about your own home. Enjoy the rest of your trip. The line went quiet. What followed was a silence of a very particular kind. The silence that falls in a small enclosed space when two people are separately processing the same terrible information, and neither of them wants to be the first to speak it aloud. Renee broke it. She heard her. The brightness was entirely gone from her voice, now replaced by something thinner and more frightened. She heard Nadia screaming, "Darnell! She is still in that house. She is in the dark, and she is screaming, and the neighbor heard her. Or someone else is in there." His voice was shaking badly enough that it vibrated in my earbud, a tremor running through every word. Someone who changed that password. Someone who has been in that house since we left. Someone who left that doll outside our door the night before last. A pause in which I could hear him trying to assemble the pieces and arriving slowly and with considerable reluctance at a shape he did not want to look at directly. "We have to go back, Renee. We have to get off this ship." "We can't." The snap in his own voice surprised him. I could hear it. "We are at sea. The next port is St. Thomas, and that is 2 full days out. There is no getting off, and there is no going back. We are stuck." The word landed between them like something dropped from a height. Stuck. On a ship in the middle of the ocean, with no car, no house keys, no way to undo what they had set in motion, and the growing, sickening certainty that someone knew exactly what they had done and was not finished with them yet. Then a third voice entered the feed, smaller, higher, carrying the uncomplicated misery of a child who has been trapped in a small, dark cabin with 2 frightened adults for reasons nobody has explained to him. "I want to go to the water park." Caleb's voice climbed steadily toward a full cry. "You promised. You said we were going to Splashaway Bay today. Why are we just sitting in here? I want ice cream. I want to go swimming." A pause filled with the particular anguish of a child who has identified the one thing most likely to land. "I wish Grandpa was here. He would take me to the pool." "Don't you dare say his name." Renee's voice came out like something thrown. "Don't you dare. This is all his fault. If that tight-fisted old man had simply given us what we needed when we needed it, none of this would be happening. We never would have had to leave her behind. We would have had enough, and none of this. You are blaming him." Darnell's laugh came out wild and fraying, the laugh of a man watching the last solid thing beneath his feet begin to give way. "You are standing in this room blaming my father because we locked a 7-year-old child in a house alone and sailed away. You are something else entirely, Renee. You turned that lock, Darnell." Her voice sharpened to a point. "You keyed in that new code. You were the one who stood there and made sure his old code was dead. Don't you try to put any piece of this on me. You are the man of this house, or you were until you stopped being a man entirely. Here you stand, useless, broke, afraid of a telephone call from a 72-year-old librarian." The cruelty in her voice found its sharpest edge. "No wonder your father prefers the adopted child. Even he can see what a failure you are." A heavy thud crossed the feed, the sound of someone being shoved hard against a surface, furniture, or a wall impact, and scramble combined. I pulled the earbud free. I sat in the quiet of the owner's suite and looked out at the water moving past the balcony rail, bright and blue, and entirely indifferent to the scene playing out 10 decks below. They were tearing each other apart faster than I had anticipated. The guilt and the fear and the financial ruin I had set in motion, all working together like pressure on a fault line. And the fracture was happening exactly where such fractures always happen, along the seam of a relationship that was never built on anything more solid than mutual convenience. What was underneath was what I had always suspected was underneath. Petty. Self-serving. And now finally frightened. Good. Let them be frightened. They had a great deal left to be frightened of. Grandpa, Nadia said, looking up from her coloring book. Are we going to have dinner with them tonight? I checked my reflection. I looked like a man about to close the deal of his career. Not with them, Nadia, but near them. I crossed to the phone. Good morning, Mr. Caldwell, the concierge answered. The chef's table is fully booked since the first day of sailing. I am aware. But the table set aside for the captain's special guests is typically held open until noon. I would like that table. Center of the room. 7 o'clock. One moment, sir. A pause. We have secured the table. It will be our privilege. One more thing. My son, Darnell Caldwell, will be dining in the main hall this evening. Place him at the table directly beside the glass partition dividing the main dining room from the chef's table. I want him to have a clear view. Understood, sir. It will be taken care of. I set the phone down. The chef's table was a glass-enclosed showcase positioned right in the heart of the main dining room, a fishbowl of privilege. Darnell and Renee would be on the other side of that glass, struggling through the standard banquet menu while their foundation cracked. And just inches away, separated by a pane of glass truffle risotto vintage champagne and us. They would see us. They would see the father they robbed. They would see the daughter they shut in a closet. Come on, sweetheart, I said, holding out my hand. We need to go shopping. You need a dress for this evening, something that catches the light, something that announces you are the most important person in the room. Because tonight, baby girl, this is not just dinner. This is a declaration. The dress was a deep emerald silk covered in sequins that scattered the light like 1,000 tiny stars. When Nadia stepped out of the dressing room and spun in front of the mirror, I watched the last trace of the frightened child from the pantry disappear. She stood straighter. She no longer looked like someone who had been left behind. She looked like a Caldwell. I straightened my own bow tie. The tuxedo still fit as if made yesterday. Ready, baby girl. I am ready, Grandpa. Do I look all right? You look dangerous, I said and winked. You look like you own every inch of this place. We arrived at the captain's dinner the way power should arrive, without announcement, without effort, without apology. The crowd opened as we moved through, not because they recognized us, but because people have a primal sense for authority. The maitre d' spotted us from 20 feet. He snapped upright. Mr. Caldwell, Miss Caldwell, your table is ready. Right this way. We passed through the velvet ropes into the chef's table. And there they were. Darnell and Renee at the adjacent table, exactly as arranged, close enough to read the sheen of perspiration on Darnell's forehead. They were working very hard. Darnell wore a rented tuxedo, a full size too large. Renee wore a silver dress that looked cheap up close, the kind of sequins that leave little scratches on your skin. She had her phone propped against the centerpiece, a ring light clamped to the breadbasket. She was live streaming. She was addressing her phone with that high saccharine voice she saved for selling diet tea and face serums. Hey guys, having the most incredible captain's dinner tonight. So blessed. Only wish little Nadia was here to share it. But she's resting up, getting herself better. Love you, baby girl. She blew a kiss at the camera. That was my cue. I stepped fully into frame, rising over her shoulder, like a storm front rolling in. I simply stood there and let my shadow fall across her phone. Renee noticed the shift in the light. She turned annoyance already sharpening her features, ready to scold whatever waiter had interrupted her broadcast. Her eyes landed on my belt buckle, traveled upward past the silk cummerbund, past the crisp shirt, past the black bow tie until they found mine. The color left her face so suddenly, it looked like a physical impact. Her mouth fell open without producing a sound. The hand adjusting her hair went slack. The phone slipped from her fingers, struck the table's edge with a hard clatter, and landed face up on the carpet. Screen fractured. Stream still running, broadcasting the ceiling and the sound of her world coming apart. Darnell had been brooding into his wineglass. He looked up at the clatter, saw Renee's face, turned. When he saw me, he choked, literally choked. He'd been mid-sip on cheap Merlot and inhaled it, erupting into a violent coughing fit that sent red wine spraying across the white tablecloth like a wound. "Hello, children," I said, my voice low and smooth and perfectly audible. Darnell wheezed, eyes bulging. "Dad!" I moved a step closer, placing one hand on the back of Renee's chair, leaning in as though sharing a private confidence. "Small world, isn't it? I'm a little surprised. I wasn't aware the money I gave you for foundation repairs included a dress code." Renee's hands were trembling so badly she had to grip the table's edge. Darnell wiped wine from his chin. "What? What are you doing here?" "Me," I let out a dry laugh. "I'm just taking my granddaughter out for ice cream. We decided to upgrade the venue." I turned and extended my hand. "Nadia, come say hello to your parents." Nadia stepped out. The sequins ignited in the light. She looked like she had stepped out of a storybook, but her eyes were steady and cool. She stood beside me, her hand in mine, and gazed at the woman who had locked her in a pantry. "Hi, Mommy," Nadia said. Renee stared at the dress. Designer silk, hand-beaded, making Renee's rented silver number look like something off a clearance rack. "Nadia," Renee stammered. "Baby you're here." "I'm here." Grandpa broke the window. He saved me. The tables nearest us had gone quiet, the silence spreading outward in rings. Caleb emerged from under the table with his handheld game, looked at Nadia's dress, and his face crumpled into entitled fury. "That's Nadia. Why is she here? Why is she wearing that? You said she was in trouble. You said she had to stay home. Why does she look better than me?" "Quiet," Darnell snapped, seizing his son's arm. "No." Caleb wrenched free. "It's not fair. That's a princess dress. You guys are being so mean. I wish Grandpa was here. He would take me to the pool." His voice rang through the dining room. The perfect closing note, the favored son shrieking in envy because the daughter they'd thrown away was finally standing in her light. I looked at Caleb evenly. "She looks better than you, Caleb, because she's with me. And I take care of my family." I turned back to Darnell. "Enjoy your dinner. I hear the chicken is adequate. We have the chef's table. The truffle risotto is supposed to be excellent." To Renee. "Oh, and you may want to check your stream. I think you forgot to say goodbye to your fans." I offered my arm to Nadia. "Shall we, darling?" "Yes, Grandpa," she said, lifting her chin. "I'm hungry." We turned our backs and walked through the glass doors. Behind us, I caught the swell of whispers, the crowd's judgment gathering. I heard Darnell hissing. I heard Caleb crying. We passed into the chef's table enclosure, and the noise of the wreckage outside fell away. I settled Nadia at the head of the table. The waiter poured sparkling apple cider into a champagne flute. "To us, baby girl." Nadia touched her flute to mine, a wide, unguarded smile breaking across her face. To us, Grandpa. I looked back through the glass partition one final time. Darnell had his head in his hands. Renee was furiously working her phone, trying to scrub the video already being screen recorded and spread by thousands. The dinner was the appetizer. The main course was their complete financial ruin, and I had brought a healthy appetite. I watched from my side of the glass as Renee scrambled for the phone, still live, still broadcasting. She couldn't pull the video now. Too many eyes. She had exactly one move left. She had to perform the performance of her life. She wiped the terror from her face and replaced it with a mask of tearful, overjoyed shock. She smoothed her dress, reset her hair, turned the camera back on. Oh my God, you guys. It's a miracle. A literal miracle. She started moving toward us, slipping under the velvet rope. Darnell stayed behind at the table, head in his hands. Renee reached our table and dropped to her knees beside Nadia's chair, angling herself, so the camera caught both of them. "Oh, my sweet baby girl," she sobbed. "Mommy missed you so much. I was just telling everyone how heartbroken I was that you were homesick. But look at you. You're here." She looked at the camera with a wide, glistening smile. "You guys look. It's Grandpa Ezra. He is such a prankster. He must have set this whole thing up as a surprise. He brought Nadia to the ship. Oh, Grandpa, you really got us. Best prank ever." She looked at me, eyes pleading, daring me to play along, daring me to be the soft, accommodating old man who always let things slide. She pulled Nadia into a hug that looked warm from the outside, but I could see her fingers pressing into the silk of Nadia's dress. "Mommy is so happy. Tell everyone how much you love the surprise." Nadia sat rigid. She waited until Renee shifted slightly to check her camera angle. Then Nadia moved. She stood up, stepped back, breaking Renee's grip. She brushed off her shoulder where Renee's hands had been the way you brush off something unclean. She looked directly into the camera lens. Then she looked directly into Renee's eyes. "You are lying, Mommy," Nadia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the silence that had settled, it landed like a gunshot, clear, steady, utterly without fear. Renee's smile cracked at the edges. "Nadia, sweetie, what are you? We are just so happy to—" "No." Nadia cut her off, her voice rising and finding its footing. "You are lying. Grandpa didn't bring me as a surprise. You left me." A woman at the next table gasped. "Nadia, honey, you're confused." Renee laughed, a thin, nervous sound. "You had the flu. I wasn't sick. I was sleeping. It was 2:30 in the morning. It was raining and there was thunder. You and Daddy and Caleb took your suitcases and you locked the door." She stepped back again, out of reach. "I woke up because I was scared. I went to your room and you were gone. I went to the kitchen and there was a note. You said you went on a business trip." Renee's mouth opened and closed. She looked at the phone. The comments were scrolling so fast they'd become a solid streak. "I tried to get out," Nadia continued, voice trembling under the weight of the memory. "I tried to open the door, but you'd changed the code. I tried to call Mrs. Pickering, but the phone lines were down. I was alone, Mommy. I was in the dark, and I was alone." Tears were streaming down Nadia's face now, but her gaze didn't waver. "I had to break the window. I took the crowbar by the back door and I smashed the glass. I had to crawl out into the rain. I cut my knee. Look," she lifted the hem of her sparkling dress. There, just above her shin, was the fresh bandage Raymond had applied that morning. "I had to run to the neighbor's house in the storm," Nadia sobbed. "Why did you leave me, Mommy? Why did you take Caleb and leave me? Is it because I'm not real?" The question hung there, heavy, suffocating. Renee swept her eyes around the room. The faces looking back at her were appalled. These were people who had children, grandchildren. They were staring at Renee with something far from admiration. She turned to me, eyes wide and desperate. "Ezra, please. Make her stop. Tell them she's making it up. Tell them she's a troubled child." I rose slowly, standing over her. "She is not troubled, Renee. She is truthful. And you are done." I nodded toward the phone. "Look at the screen. Look at what your followers think of you right now." The comments: monster, child abuser, someone call the police. I hope you rot in jail. Unfollowing. You make me sick. The image she had spent years constructing, the perfect mother, the enviable lifestyle funded with my money, crumbling in real time, live in front of everyone. Renee tried to get to her feet, but her legs buckled. She grabbed the table's edge. She looked across the glass to Darnell, who was still sitting where she'd left him, making no move to come. "Nadia, please," she begged, stretching out a hand. "Mommy loves you." Nadia looked at the hand. Then she turned to me and pressed her face into my tuxedo jacket, wrapping both arms around my waist. "Grandpa, I want to go." "We are staying right here, Nadia. We are going to eat our dinner. She is the one who's leaving." Renee made a sound halfway between a sob and a scream. She scrambled upright. She tried to kill the live stream, but her fingers were too shaking, and the phone slipped from her hand, hitting the marble floor face down. Camera went dark. Audio still alive. Everyone heard what came next. It wasn't remorse. It was naked, selfish fury. "You ruined everything," she shrieked at Nadia. "You stupid, ungrateful brat. I gave you a home. I gave you a life, and you ruined it." That was the last nail driven home. 2 security officers shouldered through the crowd. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us." "Get your hands off me," she screamed. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am a gold member. My father-in-law is Ezra Caldwell. Ezra, tell them to let me go." I looked at her, then at the guard. "I have never seen this woman before in my life. Please escort her away from my table. She is upsetting my granddaughter." "Ezra, take her," I said, turning my back. They hauled her out. She went kicking and screaming, cursing my name, cursing Nadia, cursing the ship. When the door finally swung shut, a stillness fell. Then slowly, tentatively, a woman at the adjacent table began to applaud. A man across the aisle picked it up. Within seconds, the entire section was on its feet. A standing ovation for a 7-year-old girl who had stood up and named a monster. I sat back down and pulled Nadia onto my lap. She was trembling, but the tears had stopped. "Did I do good, Grandpa?" "You did perfect, baby girl. You told the truth, and the truth set you free." Darnell was still on his feet, cycling from shock into something uglier. He stared at the doorway through which his wife had been dragged, then at the diners watching him with contempt, then at me. "You did this!" he screamed, moving toward the glass partition, fists clenched. "You humiliated her. You humiliated me. You just killed my reputation. Do you have any idea how long I worked to build that image?" I turned the sparkling cider in my glass. I glanced at Nadia, who was watching her father clearly, truly clearly, for the first time. She was looking at a small man in a rental suit throwing a tantrum because someone had finally taken his toys away. "Your reputation." I said, my voice low but carrying without effort. "You left a 7-year-old girl locked in a pantry in the middle of a thunderstorm so you could go on a cruise, and you are worried about your image. It was a mistake," he shouted, slamming his palm against the glass. "We were going to call. We were going to fix it. But you had to blow it up. You destroyed my life over a misunderstanding." I stood, folded my napkin, buttoned my jacket, and walked around until I was inches from the glass face to face with my son. I didn't destroy your life, Darnell. I financed it. And now the bank is closed. I reached into my inner breast pocket, took out my phone, unlocked it, and dialed on speaker. Conrad Whitfield here, the crisp, measured voice of a man who billed $800 an hour to take people's worlds apart, filled the dining hall. Conrad, I'm standing here with Darnell. He seems to be under the impression he still owns things. Would you walk him through the current state of his asset portfolio? Certainly. Conrad's voice reached every corner. As of 5 o'clock this afternoon, Eastern Standard Time, the deed to the property at 318 Thornbury Court has been officially revoked. The property was purchased through a trust held in your father's name. You were a tenant at will. That tenancy has been terminated, effective immediately. That's my house, Darnell said. We have lived there for 5 years. No, it was never your house, son. You never paid the mortgage, never covered the taxes, never paid for repairs. It was a charitable housing arrangement, and that charity has withdrawn. The locks were changed an hour ago under the supervision of the sheriff's department. Your personal effects are being packed by a bonded moving company. They'll be in a storage unit in Charlotte. You have 30 days to cover the fees. If you fail, the contents will be auctioned. This is illegal. We have rights. Then you abandoned a minor child in that property. Under North Carolina law, that constitutes a breach of the occupancy agreement, to say nothing of the felony implications. You have no rights here, Darnell. Furthermore, Conrad continued, regarding the vehicle, the 2022 BMW X5, registered under your father's co-signature lease payments, drawn from his account for 24 months. That authorization has been canceled. A repossession order is now active. The vehicle will be towed within the hour. To my car. How am I supposed to get to work? You don't have a job, Darnell, I said. You lost it 8 months ago. You've been pretending to go to work while you gambled through my money. Don't talk to me about work. Darnell recoiled. He hadn't known I knew about the job. Conrad, finish it. The American Express Platinum, the Visa signature, and the joint checking account, all supplementary cards, issued under your father's primary credit line. As of 10 minutes ago, all cards have been reported compromised. Accounts frozen, credit lines closed. You currently have 0 available credit and 0 cash balance. A pause. In short, Mr. Caldwell, you are destitute. The line went dead. Darnell stood with his hands shaking his face the shade of old ash. He looked at the rented tuxedo on his body, at the half-eaten dinner, at the grand ship surrounding him. He understood he was standing in the middle of the ocean, encircled by luxury, without a dime to make a phone call. Dad. His voice stripped down to something small and broken. You stranded us. No home, no car, no money. We have nothing. You're not homeless, Darnell. You're just living at the income level you've actually earned. 0. At that precise moment, a waiter approached with a slim black leather folder and a card machine. Sir, I apologize for the interruption. The credit card on file for your stateroom has been declined. Run it again. It's an error. We have run it 3 times. We also tried your wife's card. Both flagged as inactive. We require alternative payment for the cost of the crew's onboard purchases and this evening's dinner. The outstanding balance is $15,400. $15,000 plus gratuity. Darnell dug into his pockets and spread cards across the table like a man fanning out a hand he was praying would save him. Try this one. The machine beeped. Declined. The Amex. Declined. The MasterCard. Declined. He emptied the wallet, completely sweat dripping from his nose onto the linen. "None of them are going to work, Darnell. I told you." I cut the cord. He looked up, his expression unraveling. "You stranded us in the middle of the ocean. You're not homeless, Darnell. You're just living at the income level you've actually earned." Darnell sank into his chair and buried his face in his hands. A sob came out, wretched and hollow. The two security guards who had removed Renee appeared at the entrance and moved toward him. Nadia tugged at my sleeve. "Grandpa is Daddy going to jail too?" "Not jail, baby girl." The guards reached the table. "Sir, you'll need to come with us." Darnell rose, slowly, hollowed out, defeated. He looked at me one final time, that same look I had seen 1,000 times, expecting me to produce my checkbook and make it all go away. "Dad, please," he mouthed. I lifted my glass. "Bon voyage, Darnell." The guards walked him out. He moved with the slow, dragging steps of a man heading somewhere he couldn't avoid, past tables of whispering diners, past the buffet he could no longer afford, past the life he had borrowed and squandered. A homeless man in a tuxedo walking the plank he had built himself. I turned back to Nadia. "Now, baby girl, what about that ice cream?" She smiled real wide, unburdened. "Yes, please, Grandpa, with sprinkles." "You've got it." The dining room had shifted from a sanctuary into a circus. Renee had one more act. The full weight of everything crashed down on her all at once: the dead credit cards, the detained husband, the social media empire collapsing in real time. She didn't weep. Renee shrieked. The kind of sound that set crystal glasses trembling. She seized the tablecloth off the nearest empty table and tore it away. Silverware plates and flower vases crashed to the floor. She snatched a half-empty wine bottle from a serving station and flung it at the glass partition. It exploded on impact, red wine spraying across the carpet. Diners ducked. I rose, placed a hand on Nadia's shoulder. "Stay here, baby girl. Put your headphones back on. You don't need to hear this part." Nadia did as she was told, pulling the noise-canceling headphones over her ears and turning back to her ice cream. The heavy double doors burst open. Captain Roland Brecker strode in, flanked by 4 security officers, and the ship's chief of security, impeccable in his dress, White's 4 gold stripes on his shoulder boards. A man built of iron and salt water who had no patience for foolishness. The entire room went still. Renee pointed a trembling finger at me. "Him! Arrest him! He stole my life. He shut off my money. He wants to kidnap my daughter." Captain Brecker surveyed the broken glass, the overturned table, then turned his gaze on Renee. "Madam, you are destroying ship property and disturbing the peace." He turned to me, reading the room. "Mr. Caldwell, I was informed there was a situation regarding payment. I did not expect a riot." Captain," I said, stepping forward. "I apologize for the disruption my family has caused. But this is not simply a matter of a declined credit card." I reached into my jacket and withdrew a manila envelope. "I am formally reporting 2 crimes. First, financial fraud involving unauthorized use of my credit lines. Second, and considerably more serious, child abandonment." I handed the envelope to the captain. "Inside you will find a notarized affidavit from neighbors in Charlotte, time-stamped security footage of these 2 individuals leaving a 7-year-old child alone in a locked house for 48 hours, and a copy of the police report filed this morning in North Carolina." The captain opened the envelope. He read through the document's expression hardening with every line. He studied the photograph of Nadia asleep in the pantry. He studied the timestamp. He glanced over toward Nadia, who was happily finishing her dessert. This child, my granddaughter. They left her to die so they could board your ship. I brought her here to keep her safe and to confront them." Renee let out a manic laugh. "He's lying. He is senile. Nadia was sick. We left her with a nanny." The captain looked at Renee and closed the folder. "Madam, under maritime law specifically, the Cruise Vessel Security and Safety Act, the master of a ship holds authority to detain any person who poses a threat to the vessel or has committed a serious crime on board or ashore. You can't detain me. I am an American citizen." "Exactly. We are in international waters. Out here I am the law, and I do not look kindly on people who abandon children." He signaled to his team. "Take her to the brig." The brig, like jail. It is a secure holding facility on Deck 0. You will remain there until we dock in Miami, where the FBI and Child Protective Services will be waiting. "No," Renee screamed. "You can't. I have rights. I have followers. I will live stream this. Madam, your phone is at the bottom of the ocean, and your rights currently consist of the right to remain silent, which I strongly recommend you exercise." The security team moved in. She kicked and bit, trying to drive her teeth into a guard's arm. They were professionals. They marched her toward the exit heels, dragging screams bouncing off the vaulted ceiling. "Where is Darnell?" she wailed. "Darnell, help me." "Your husband is already being processed," the chief of security said flatly. "You'll be neighbors." I watched her go. I felt nothing except cold, leaden satisfaction. Then I heard a small voice. "Mommy." Caleb. He was standing near the kitchen entrance where the staff had been keeping him occupied. He had seen all of it, watched his father get taken away, watched his mother dragged out fighting. He looked terrified, clutching a half-eaten cookie, eyes wide with the trauma of watching his entire world come apart. He ran toward me, grabbing my leg. "Grandpa, where are they taking Mommy? I want to go home." I looked down at the boy. Spoiled, yes. Cruel to Nadia, yes. But he was 8 years old. He was as much a victim of his parents as Nadia was. He had been taught to be this way. I set a hand on his head. "They're going to a timeout, Caleb. A very long one." "Captain," I said, looking up. "The boy cannot go to the brig. He is innocent in all of this." "Agreed. We have a secure youth center with licensed childcare professionals. He'll be housed in a staff cabin under around-the-clock supervision. Fed, safe." I crouched to Caleb's level. "Caleb, you're going to go with this lady. She's going to give you pizza and let you play video games. You'll stay there until we get back to Florida." "But I want to stay with you." He eyed Nadia. "How come she gets to stay with you?" "Because Caleb, she knows how to behave. And right now you need to learn how to be on your own without your parents. That's a lesson they should have given you a long time ago." He looked at me then, at the empty doorway where his parents had disappeared. He took the youth worker's hand, his shoulders sagging. I watched him walk away. It was a mercy. The dining room had gone quiet. The spectacle was finished. Waiters were sweeping up broken glass. The orchestra in the corner eased into a tentative waltz. Captain Brecker extended his hand. "Mr. Caldwell, I apologize for the disruption. The bill for the damages will be added to your son's outstanding balance." I shook it. "The authorities have already been notified. We transmitted the digital evidence to the Miami field office. They will be there when the ship arrives." The captain moved off. I stood alone for a moment. I straightened my tie, picked a piece of lint from my lapel, then walked back to the table. Nadia had pulled her headphones down. "Is the bad lady in the dungeon?" "Something like that, baby girl. A room with no windows, just like the pantry. Nadia nodded, solemn and satisfied. Good. She should think about what she did. I offered her my arm. Come on, Nadia. Let's head back to the suite. There's a movie on and room service does excellent popcorn. We walked out of the dining room straight up the grand staircase. At the top, I looked down over the railing. Below the ship hummed with life people drinking, gambling, dancing, unaware of what had unfolded just beneath them. But far below the waterline in the steel belly of the vessel, Darnell and Renee were sitting in a cold metal cell, listening to the engines drone, understanding that their vacation was over and that their life sentence had just begun. I squeezed Nadia's hand. Let's go upstairs. The view is better from the top. The remaining 48 hours were a study in duality. Up on deck 17, in the rarefied air of the owner's suite, life was a technicolor dream of healing and joy. Down on deck, 0 below the waterline in the brig, it was a gray, humid nightmare. I made sure Nadia had everything she had been denied. We took over the pool. I sat in a cabana watching over her while she splashed with other children. For the first few hours, she kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting Renee to materialize and scold her for getting her hair wet. But they never came. Slowly, the tension drained from her small shoulders. She discovered she could shriek with laughter, and the only consequence was that I would grin and wave. We went to the Aqua Theater, ate cotton candy, played mini-golf on the upper deck, with the wind tossing Nadia's hair, until she laughed so hard she got the hiccups. It was the vacation she was supposed to have had. It was the childhood she was supposed to have had. In the brig, the reports told a different story. Confined to a steel box smaller than their walk-in closet, a bunk bolted to the floor, a stainless toilet in the corner. The constant mechanical whine of ventilation, Darnell and Renee dissolved within 6 hours. Renee blamed Darnell for everything. She raged about her ruined dress, her ruined reputation, the stench of the room. She demanded organic food and bottled water. She got tap water and dry rolls. Darnell screamed back, told her she was a vampire who had bled him hollow. The sea turned rough as we crossed the Gulf Stream. Down in the bow where the brig sat, the motion was violent. They were seasick. Violently and relentlessly, I pictured Renee retching into a steel toilet, while Darnell lay groaning on the floor. Some might have called it cruel. I remembered the feverish child curled in the pantry, shivering in the dark. Any sympathy burned off like mist. On the final evening, I sat with Nadia on the balcony. The sun was going down, smearing the horizon in bruised purples and fiery oranges. We had just finished room service cheeseburgers and fries, Nadia's choice. She was in her pajamas, hair braided, looking peaceful, in a way I hadn't seen before. "Grandpa," she said, gazing at the water. "Do you hate them?" The question stopped me cold. I looked at her expecting fear, but found only curiosity. She was working to understand the world. I took a sip of iced tea. "No, baby girl, I don't hate them. Hate is a fire that scorches the one carrying it. I'm not burning." "Then why are they in the timeout room?" I turned my chair to face her. "Nadia, do you remember when I showed you the garden at the farm? What I told you happens if we let the weeds go." She nodded. "They choke the flowers. They take all the water and the sun." Exactly. Darnell and Renee let weeds take root in their hearts. Selfishness, greed, they grew so large they strangled out the love. They forgot how to be parents. I put them in that room not because I hate them, but because they need to learn. They spent their whole lives running. The weeds. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "You can't outrun it forever, Nadia. Sooner or later, you have to get down in the dirt and pull them yourself. Is the room helping them pull the weeds? I don't know. Some weeds have very deep roots, but at least in there they can't hurt the flowers." I reached out and touched her cheek. And you, Nadia, you are my most precious flower. My job is to make sure you get the sun. She gave me a small smile, sad but full of understanding. I like the sun. So do I, baby girl. I tucked her into the big bed one final time. She was asleep almost instantly. I stayed up, packed our bags, and stepped out onto the balcony one last time. Off in the distance, city lights bled into the clouds. Miami. Down below, Darnell and Renee were likely awake, staring into the black of their cell, sick with dread. They could feel the ship decelerating. They knew when that door opened, it wouldn't be a crew member with breakfast. It would be the consequences they'd been outrunning for years. The ship shuddered as the side thrusters fought the current, grinding the massive hull against the concrete pier of the port of Miami. From the balcony, I watched the lines being thrown. Down on the dock, a row of black SUVs and marked police cruisers sat idling red and blue lights, playing off the white hull. They were there for my son. Nadia was perched on the sofa, with her small backpack already on her shoulders, one hand wrapped around Conrad Whitfield's. He had flown in early that morning to meet us. "The gangway is secured," Conrad said. "The Miami-Dade police and federal agents are boarding now. We have clearance to disembark through the crew exit, avoids the press mob at the main terminal." I crossed the room to Nadia and crouched down. "We're going to walk off this ship now. There will be some commotion, and you may see your parents. But you don't have to say a word. You don't have to look at them. You just hold my hand and keep moving." Nadia nodded, solemn and brave. I lifted her into my arms. She was getting too big for that. But today I needed her close, needed her to feel my heartbeat, so she'd know it was steady. The crew gangway was a narrow metal ramp, normally used to haul in supplies. The heat at the bottom struck us like something solid. Waiting on the concrete were 4 uniformed officers from Miami-Dade, 2 FBI agents in windbreakers, and a woman in a gray pantsuit with a clipboard, the Child Protective Services liaison. Conrad stepped forward and shook hands with the lead detective, a man named Fuentes. "Here they come," someone said. The heavy steel door clanged open. 2 ship security officers came out first. Between them, stumbling into the sudden glare of morning, was Darnell. His rental tuxedo was stained and creased shirt hanging open, eyes sunken and blinking hard against the light. Behind him came Renee. Her hair a matted ruin makeup streaked in black rivulets, one strap of the silver dress pinned with a safety pin. She dug her heels into the gangway, straining against the female security officer on her arm. "Get your hands off me! This is a violation of my civil rights. I want my phone." Caleb was brought out separately, holding a social worker's hand. He spotted me and gave a small, uncertain wave. I waved back. Darnell looked up, took in the police cruisers, took in the federal agents, and then he saw me standing beside the black SUV holding Nadia's hand. He stopped walking. The officer behind him pressed him forward, but Darnell planted his feet. "Dad!" he rasped. "Dad, help us! Please, it was just a mistake." I looked at him, at the man who had once been my son. The anger had burned out. The grief was gone. What remained was cold, flat clarity. "It wasn't a mistake, Darnell. It was a choice. And this, I let a beat of silence land. This is the receipt." The officers moved him along. They guided him into the back of a squad car. He sank against the seat, staring out the window, searching for a mercy that wasn't there. Renee didn't look at me. She kept her gaze on the ground, something inside her already caved in. They put her in a separate car. The door slammed with a finality that was almost satisfying. Conrad came over. "The temporary custody order for Nadia is signed by the judge in North Carolina. We have jurisdiction. Caleb will be placed with Renee's mother, but will petition for visitation rights." "Good," I said. I looked down at Nadia. She was watching the police cars pull away their lights, dissolving into port traffic. Are they gone, Grandpa? Yes, Nadia, they're gone. She drew in a slow, deep breath of humid Florida air. Okay. Can we go home now to the farm? I pulled open the door of the SUV. Yes, baby girl. We're going home. We drove away from the port. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, on the open highway stretching out in front of us, and on the little girl sitting beside me who had finally learned what it felt like to be loved without conditions attached. The financial guillotine had come down. But back on the dock, I had noticed the cameras, 3 local news stations, and a national affiliate I had tipped off now stationed behind the police barricade lenses trained forward. Renee's eyes went wide. For just a flicker of a second, I saw the old instinct fire the reflex to pose, to arrange her face to perform. She squared her shoulders. She attempted to toss her ruined hair. And then she saw me standing with Nadia in my arms. The mask shattered. She lunged toward the cameras, dragging the officers with her. When it's him, she shrieked. My father-in-law, Ezra Caldwell. He set us up. He is the devil. He has millions he never told anyone about. He paid people to lie. He hacked our security system. He trapped us on that ship. He is a monster. He hates me. He is the devil. Do you hear me? That old man is the devil. The press swung their cameras toward me. They saw a 75-year-old man holding a small girl. They saw the quiet steadiness in how I stood, the way Nadia pressed her face against my neck. Mr. Caldwell, do you have a response? She's calling you evil. I could have walked away. But I understood how the world processes silence. It fills the void with doubt. I needed to make sure that when Nadia was old enough to search this day, she would find her grandfather standing in the light and telling the truth. I handed Nadia to Conrad. I straightened my cuffs. I walked into the ring of microphones. I did not lift my voice. I looked at Renee first, panting in the officer's grip, then faced the cameras. A devil. I said, letting the words settle. I pointed back at the ship. A devil is not someone who brings the truth into the light. A devil is a person who looks at a 7-year-old child, a child who had already lost her first family, and decides a vacation matters more than her life. A devil is someone who locks a little girl in a dark house during a thunderstorm with nothing but a box of crackers so they can fly off and photograph themselves drinking wine. A devil is someone who uses a child as a prop for internet fame, then throws her aside the moment the camera goes off. I turned back to Renee. Her mouth was open. The words had left her. If shielding my granddaughter from people like that makes me a devil, then I will gladly burn. But I will burn knowing she is safe. And you, Renee, you will just burn. I turned my back on her. Get them out of here, detective. The officers loaded Darnell and Renee into separate squad cars. The doors slammed. Renee's screaming cut off. The silence that dropped over that dock was dense and complete. I walked back to Conrad and took Nadia into my arms. She looked up at me, eyes wide. Is she gone, Grandpa? She's gone, baby girl. I opened the rear door and buckled Nadia into her booster seat. Grandpa, she said, as I settled into the driver's seat. You called yourself a devil. I looked at her in the rearview mirror and gave her a tired, gentle smile. Only to the bad guys, Nadia. To you, I'm just Grandpa. She smiled back. Can we go home now? I miss the chickens. I turned the engine over. Yes, Nadia, we're going home. And we are never looking back. The Charlotte courtroom smelled of floor wax, old wood, and quiet desperation. 30 days had passed since the ship docked in Miami. Darnell and Renee sat across the aisle from me, transformed by careful calculation. Renee wore a modest beige cardigan and a severe bun, performing repentance. Darnell sat small and defeated in a cheap suit, They were fighting for custody not out of love, but because Renee needed Nadia to rewrite her own story. Without the child, she was simply a predator. Conrad Whitfield sat beside me still as a blade. Renee took the stand first. Her performance was flawless, tears on cue, trembling voice, pressed tissue. I know I made mistakes, Your Honor. The pressure of the internet consumed me. But Nadia is my whole world. I am a good mother. Conrad rose, slowly buttoned his jacket, and approached the witness stand, holding nothing but a tablet. Mrs. Vance, are you familiar with your iCloud-connected journal app? She faltered. I write my thoughts down. It's therapy. We subpoenaed your cloud data during the fraud investigation. He tapped the screen. Exhibit G, Your Honor, entries from Mrs. Vance's personal diary. Her attorney objected. Judge Ashby overruled immediately. Conrad read without flinching. March 12th. Nadia is getting too old to be cute. Maybe we rehome her. The judge visibly reacted. May 4th. Once we get the inheritance, we can dump the kid. Put her back in the system. The ROI on her is negative now. Then Conrad's voice dropped to something quiet and lethal. Entry from 2 weeks ago. If she disappears, the sympathy followers would be huge. We could monetize the grief. The courtroom fell completely silent, the kind that only descends when something genuinely monstrous has entered the room. Well, that was a dark thought, Renee whispered. Everyone has dark thoughts. But some thoughts cannot be unspoken, and some silences say everything. You left her in a locked house with no food, Conrad said. You created the accident, Mrs. Vance. You set the stage. You were just waiting for the curtain to fall. He turned to face the judge. This woman did not make a mistake. She made a business plan. She acquired a child for profit, and when that profit dried up, she drafted an exit strategy that involved that child's erasure. She is not a mother. She is a predator. Renee looked at Darnell. He was staring at her, horror-struck. He hadn't known. He had known she was greedy, vain, but he hadn't known she had put it in writing, hadn't known she had planned to discard Nadia like a worn-out prop. You wrote that? Darnell whispered, his voice carrying through the hushed room. You wrote that you wanted her to disappear. Renee wheeled on him. Shut up, Darnell. I did it for us. I did it for the money. You wanted the money too. I didn't want her dead, Darnell shouted, rising so fast his chair toppled. I wanted a vacation. I didn't want to kill her. Sit down, Mr. Caldwell. Judge Ashby barked, gavel striking hard. Darnell dropped back into his seat, sobbing into his palms the sound of a man who had traded his soul and was just now reading the fine print on the check that bounced. Judge Ashby looked at both of them. She took off her glasses and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. I have heard enough. She put her glasses back on. Her eyes had gone to flint. In my 20 years on this bench, I have seen negligence. I have seen addiction. I have seen cruelty. But I have never encountered such cold, deliberate commodification of a human life. She turned to Renee. Mrs. Vance, you are devoid of maternal instinct. You are a danger to any child placed in your care. She turned to Darnell. And you, Mr. Caldwell, you stood by. You enabled. You funded. You are equally culpable because you allowed it to happen. The judge lifted her pen. The court hereby terminates the parental rights of Darnell Caldwell and Renee Vance effective immediately. This termination applies to the adopted child, Nadia Caldwell, and the biological child, Caleb Caldwell. No! Renee screamed, lurching to her feet. You can't take Caleb. He is mine. He is my blood. You surrendered your claim to that blood the moment you demonstrated yourself capable of such monstrosity. Caleb will be placed in the permanent custody of his maternal grandmother, who has been fully vetted by CPS. And regarding Nadia Caldwell, the judge continued, shifting her gaze to me. The court grants full permanent legal guardianship to Mr. Ezra Caldwell. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My shoulders dropped. It was finished. She was safe. She was mine. Renee was screaming again, but it came to me from a great distance. The bailiffs were moving. When the court adjourned, I stood. Conrad shook my hand. "We did it, Ezra." I turned to go. "Dad." I stopped. I turned slowly. Darnell was standing by the defense table, looking like the little boy I used to take fishing. That boy was long gone, swallowed whole by the gutted man in his place. "I didn't know, Dad. I didn't know she wrote those things. I didn't know she wanted her gone. You knew enough, Darnell. You knew you locked the door. You knew you left her. You don't get to plead ignorance just because you didn't write the plan yourself. You carried it out." He moved toward me, both hands reaching. "I've lost everything, Dad. The house, the car, my wife, my kids. I'm sleeping on a cot in a shelter. I'm scrubbing toilets at a diner. Help me, please. Just give me a chance." I looked at him. I looked at those outstretched hands that had taken and taken and taken. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a single crisp $1 bill. I walked over to him. I set it in his palm. "There's your inheritance, Darnell. Don't spend it all in one place." I turned and walked away. "Dad!" He screamed behind me, a raw, stripped sound of total collapse. "Dad, don't leave me." I kept walking. I wasn't leaving him. He had left us a long time ago. I stepped out into the hallway. Nadia was seated on a bench, swinging her legs. She jumped to her feet. "Grandpa, is it over?" I swept her into my arms. "It's done, baby girl. Time to go home." We stepped out of the courthouse into the bright Charlotte sun, leaving those shadows behind us for good. The North Carolina sun felt different here. Soft light filtered through old oak trees as I sat on the porch of my new farmhouse watching Nadia trot across the paddock on a gentle mare named Cinnamon. She wore a helmet and riding boots, her back perfectly straight. She looked nothing like the terrified child who had once hidden in a pantry. She looked free. It had been exactly 1 year since I walked out of that courtroom. I sold the old house 2 months later, too many ghosts. I bought this 60-acre horse ranch 2 hours north of Charlotte instead. Quiet, green, ours. Conrad still sent monthly updates. Darnell was scrubbing mud off tires at a car wash, living in a boarding house downtown. He sent one letter, "Dad, I am sorry, I miss you." I folded it into my safe and said nothing. Silence was the only teacher he had ever respected. Renee had fared no better. The recordings of her cruelty followed her everywhere. She was working a checkout line in Tennessee under a false name, having filed for bankruptcy twice. Caleb was enrolled in a behavioral boarding school in Vermont, not as punishment, but as healing. His recent letters to Nadia were softer now. I saw a deer. I didn't scare it away. Nadia kept every one. That evening, she ran up the porch steps, smelling of hay and sunshine. She rested her head against my knee and asked quietly, "Do you miss them, Grandpa?" I looked out over the rolling hills. "I miss who I wanted them to be, not who they actually were." She nodded, then looked up at me with fierce, certain eyes. "You're the giant who broke the castle to save the princess." She hugged me tightly, the kind of hug that holds every ounce of safety a child was long denied. My real legacy was never in a bank account. It was a little girl who could ride a horse without fear and a home where she finally felt safe. And just like that, it was over. Not with shouting, not with begging. With truth delivered in a room full of witnesses at a table no one could ignore. None of this came cheaply. 15 years of biting my tongue. 15 years of watching Darnell treat Nadia like a burden and treat me like a fool he could manage. What it cost me was silence. What it gave me was everything. I believe God does not always move quickly, but when the time is right, He places you exactly where you need to be and hands you exactly the right evidence. The Lord's timing turned a cruise ship dining room into a courtroom, and justice found its way to every person in that story. If you are a parent, a grandparent, or anyone who has ever felt dismissed because of your age, this story was for you. Because it proves one thing above all else: dignity does not expire. So here is what I want you to take away. Do not mistake someone's quietness for weakness. The most powerful people in the room are often the ones saying the least. If someone uses your trust as a tool against you, do not react, document. Let the record speak louder than your anger ever could. Never underestimate what a grandparent will do for a grandchild. That love is not soft. It is a force. And if you are part of the adults 50+ community listening right now, know that your years are not a liability. They are leverage. This has been a family revenge story for everyone who ever sat at the quiet end of the table and got counted out. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to Honor Revenge Stories. There are more stories waiting here that I think you will feel in your chest. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you thought of Ezra. Tell me what you would have done. Thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other.